Hi folks, welcome to IMB Magazine. My name is Clive Forth from MTB Skills and you're joining us for the Skills and Technique feature. Each issue we're going to be looking at different techniques and the core skills to riding mountain bikes. So sit back and relax and enjoy. Okay, so we've moved away from the cross-country style trail, enduro type trail riding stuff and terrain, and we're moving into our dirt jump area here where we've got some very specific tabletop jumps, and we're just going to session the jumps for a little bit. So 3 progressive tabletops in a row. They get slightly steeper, slightly taller as you work your way down through them, and that gives us 3 options to make some different shapes. So your jump technique is about managing your speed control on the way in. This big thing always of vision. You need to be looking ahead, sighting for the landing on the other side, sighting for the next feature, so we're never dropping our vision down. We're always looking up the trail, moving the eyeballs to scan, remember, when it's more technical stuff and you've got the rocks and roots poking out in there. Speed control, we obviously need to be quick enough that we can clear the jump and make a nice smooth landing into the downslope, and we don't want to be too quick that we over jump it, thus killing our speed into the next feature. We've got a good bit of trail width here to play with from the grass to the grass, so we've got a bit of room where we can meander left right and make some shapes moving the bike left right. So we'll just put some stuff into practice. We can manual over the tops of these, we can just squash it out altogether and keep the bike on the deck and ride over the top of them, or we can use that jump face and that transition and just let it float and jump up out of there in order to hit the downslope. And if you want, you can throw some shape in for style and that as you go over the top. Let's pick a run then. So first run, we'll just manual over the top of everything. Okay, so manualing across the top of the features. You always want to let the trail do as much work for you as you possibly can, and in these scenarios it's kind of giving it to you on a plate. As the bike comes out of that jump face, it's making that shape already, and you've just got to kind of follow that shape and let the gradient give you the lift on the front wheel. And as the back wants to release, it's just a case of squeezing the legs out and pushing that back wheel down, helping you sustain that manual across the top. Remember, always covering the back brake. You've got those 2 saving maneuvers to prevent the loop out. You can push the elbows out, get the chest closer to the stem. It's going to bring the front wheel back down, or you can just feather the back brake a little bit. Right, so before we get into jumping proper, that's one way to use the shape, work with the shape and let it, and allow the bike to come light and to float over the top edge. Not getting fully airborne, might be a little bit of air under the rear wheel on occasion, but you're trying to squeeze that back end down to keep that manual across the top. So next thing we can do is try to go a bit quicker, but this time we want to keep the bike fully on the floor. So we're going to have to really squash these jumps out. It's going to want to come light and get airborne. I'm going to have to push it back down onto the surface using my limbs. So as you can see in that run, we're much more aggressive in our sprint into the first feature. Evidently we're going a lot quicker, yet we can still keep the bike on the trail. So it's all about using the limbs, the arms and the legs, allowing the bike to come up into the body, so we're standing tall and proud up onto the first feature. Everything compresses, and as it wants to come off the backside into the downslope, rather than allowing it then to essentially jump to flat, you're pushing the limbs out, driving them down to get the bike back on the terrain, rinse and repeat on the way through there. Okay, so this time we're going to carry a bit of pace in. We're not going to do much in the way of working that transition, pumping the bike through it. We're just going to let the bike float out of it, just to feel what the shapes are like. Superb, so another run in our little jump session. And this time we've not really put a lot of effort in terms of, you know, working the transition and lifting out the top of the lip to get added amplitude and height out of the jump. We've really let the shape of the jump itself do the work for us. So they're quite low and quite floaty, and the way that they've been made is that they get slightly steeper as you work down through them, so they give you more airtime by their own shapes. So if you really did want to like pull out the first one, you'd have to work it very hard, put a lot of effort in. Slightly less so on this one in the midpoint here, and the end one kind of really does all the work for you. It's a good way to work in, well, you know, this whole thing is what we're doing is our progression sessions and progressing our technique. So by playing with some of the shapes and just sessioning it and just feeling how they sort of respond below you and how the bike responds to them. Is it getting kicked up? Are they tight in their transition? Pays dividends in the long run rather than just coming in here like a bat out of hell, first time blind, not knowing the jumps and so on. There's loads of other there's and bits out there on that they're Trinterwebs, as you'll well be aware of. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. I've got to tell you, some of the stuff I've watched myself that comes typically out of Canada and the US, really, really good. And then there's some average stuff, and obviously there's some atrocious stuff as well. The way that different instructors and coaches talk about working the jump face, it does differ slightly. We're all trying to get to the same point. There's quite often chat about pressing into the jump, and that can be, I think, slightly confusing. We don't really need to like push into the fork or bounce the fork. You'll see people on BMXs get plenty of airtime out of various ramp shapes with zero suspension at all. So this whole thing of having to compress the suspension, it may be slightly confusing in the way that the message has been relayed. What's always going to happen as you're coming into a transition is the bike and your body, your limbs, they are going to get loaded up. It's just a simple process of physics. You're going that way into a feature. There's a point where things get loaded up and squashed. On suspension bikes, predominantly, it's the fact that the bike feels like it pushes into the face and squats in. And it's really the squatting of the back end that can give a little bit more of a kick than, let's say, if you're on a hardtail. You know, you still get the kick on a hardtail because you're storing that energy through the tyre, the wheel, the frame, through your limbs, and it has to be released when you come out the top of the jump face. It's why it's important to sometimes slow things down and learn the shapes, like ride through them and feel how much pressure is being generated in that transition, in that jump face, and get in the shape so that you're coming out of it nice and clean before making any shapes to level the bike up. When you want to level the bike up at the midpoint over here, and particularly with tabletops and so on, when you've got a downslope to land into, you want to drive the bar forward away from you. It naturally brings the back of the bike up. If you remember it from the bunny hop, this shape brings the back end of the bike up and levels it out. So you have very little of that to do. You know, you don't really want to snap that bar forward too hard because you'll kick the back end up and start to go OTB. But your timing's got to be right. You do it too soon and your back wheel's not released, it's a no-no. You do it too late, you kind of get away with it, but you start to move more towards the pencil-shaped jump and you can no longer get the rear wheel up. So just play with them, session them, play with the jump faces, see how they feel before you go a bit quicker and look to get a bit more amplitude. It's when you're getting more amplitude that you really do start to press into that jump face. And I say it's naturally occurring through speed, but you can also load it up by being on top of the bike and pushing in. And that pushing and driving through, I think, is where other tutors and coaches that I've listened to their stuff, that's where they get that vibe from. So when you're sessioning, what can be quite a cool thing to play with here is, rather than using, again, brute force and ignorance, in this case speed, to do the work, see if you can get that amplitude, get that height enough to match the two sides of the feature with less speed. So we're using always, when we're photographing and filming, we pick a start point to run in from, and it's the same when we're sessioning. We go back up the trail, pick the same start point, you've got that consistency. Same gear, you've got that consistency. Stick several pedal strokes in, just measure it, be a bit methodical about it. So this time, rather than using the start ramp and kind of like pumping through the first features to carry and increase speed, I'm actually going to come off the first tabletop, see if I can clear it. Give it, what, say a couple of cranks just to get moving. And then what we'll do, if we're clearing it of that, is we'll shorten it again. We'll come off the second tabletop with pretty much no run up, couple of cranks, and see how we go. So by taking the speed out, I'm going to really force myself to use technique to clear the feature. Right, we almost made that look easy, so we're going to make a real challenge now in our sessioning. We're going to see if we can get it from this tabletop only. Couple of pedal strokes, let's see how it goes. Right, so yes, they do go from the tabletop before, with a couple of cranks, but it's a lot of work. You've got to really grind that gear to get 2 cranks in, and then you totally over egging it to get the amplitude, really working that jump face, using all of that compression force, firing up out of that, punching the bike in the air to level it off and make it into the downslope. So that wraps up our session. The point is just to give you that idea that you can mix up your riding, and it's really valuable. Don't just go out and smash out the miles. Don't just go out and hang out with your mates and you know, ride around the woods. Like, just have a plan, put a plan together. Be like, right, today I'm going to go and hang with the boys and not worry about like the fitness or the, you know, the session inside of it. And another day, you know, I'm going to go make the fitness. But do take time to have a plan and go and session things, because it opens up so much more in your riding. There's stuff today that Daniel and I have looked at that I wouldn't have seen, and I work on these trails and ride these trails on a weekly basis. And just by stopping and sessioning things, we're seeing new lines, new options. And the real key is it forces you into that deep concentration state of mind. You're really having to focus on what you're doing, how you're doing it, all the little nuances in the technique. And they're the things that then come out when you are out making the fitness riding, or, you know, riding with your friends and just kind of razzing it through the trails. They're all the little maneuvers and techniques and subtleties that are the saving grace in a lot of situations as well. So there's a lot to be said for it. Thanks for tuning in again. It's brilliant sharing this stuff with you. We're really stoked to be out here doing this. Do all that stuff of sharing, liking, subscribing. Get following us. If you're not on YouTube and you're watching this on the mag, get over to YouTube and follow us. And if you're on YouTube, get over to the mag and read the features. So until next time, stick at it, keep it rubber side down, and we'll see you out on the trail somewhere. Take care now.